Hannah Murray on TRE in the afternoon.
Joining us on the line now is Lewis Senior. He's a globally recognized expert in personality diversity and high-performance team development. He co-founded Equilibria and created the E-Colors framework and essential leadership cycle used across energy, sport and corporate sectors. He's the co-author of a new book called Personalities Remixed, which helps you to unlock human behavior, communicate effectively and connect with anybody. The book reveals how the science of personality diversity can transform your relationships at work and in life. Welcome to the show, Lewis.
Thank you, Hannah, and I really appreciate the introduction.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's great to have you with us on the show. And what a fascinating life you must lead, looking into personalities. And I mean, I guess it's really important to understand our own personalities and how likely we are to get on or not with other personalities in life.
Yeah, very much so. It's been quite a journey. We actually started way back. I had 30 years in the oil and gas business up until about 2004 and began to realize that with all the goodwill in the world, actually we started from a perspective of seeing too many people hurt, maimed and killed and wanted to really do something about it. And so we co-founded Equilibria in 2004, which was started off looking at how people could get hurt relative to the personality, and then it just grew from there. We've had wonderful opportunities around the world to bring our personality diversity technology, which we call the E-Colors, into everything from leadership, teamwork, industry, schools, hospitals, anywhere where there's people involved, there's an opportunity to better understand ourselves and each other.
Yeah. So tell us about this E-Colors framework. How does it work?
Okay, so if you go back in time, right through to the Chinese 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, they recognized that there were 4 personality styles, which they described as earth, wind, fire, and water. And then through the ages, people have found different ways to describe the personalities, from Hippocrates all the way to Carl Jung in the 20s, to Myers and Briggs, who during the Second World War actually developed a program based on personality for women to find out which jobs most suited them while the men were out at war. We decided that when we developed the E-Colors back in 2004, we never wanted it to be for people being able to get picked for a job or a task. It was very much about understanding themselves. So if you translate the 4 personality styles, like I said, we just call it red, yellow, green, and blue. So, Hannah, I'll give you a little bit of a kind of understanding of that. So the red in us tends to represent the action-oriented side of us, the desire to get things done. And typically what you'll hear from people who've got some red in them is, what? Tell me what to do, or I'll tell you what to do. That's the doing side of us, the red. The green in us tends to be the more analytical, data-driven side of us, wants to get as much information as possible. So if you hear somebody asking a lot of questions, particularly around how, that typically represents the green. The yellow in us tends to be the socializer, the engager, and typically wants to know who, whereas the red in us wants to know the what, the green wants to know the how, the yellow wants to know the who, and then the last one is the blue, which tends to be the relator and the supporter. Probably the most misunderstood, I would think, of all the top colors, mostly because they want to know why. And unless they know the purpose of why something is being asked of them, they're not very willing to move forward. And so if you think about it, just from even what I've just described, and you think about the people in your life, some want to know what to do. I just want to get on with it. Others insist on the how. Some want to know why, and some want to know who's going to be involved, who's going to be engaged. If you translate that into any walk of life, be it from a school to a hospital to industry to the role that you have, Hannah, it becomes very important to understand that we don't all think and act the same way, and a lot of it is down to our personality.
Yeah. So is the idea that people are likely to have maybe a mixture of some or all of those colours in them, but maybe they identify with one more than the other?
Very much. So typically, actually, they'll probably identify with two. So we all have all of these four personality styles within us. Typically, two tend to be more predominant, and that's what tends to drive our actions. If you think of us as individuals, the analogy being an iceberg, then that piece above the water, that tends to represent our personality from where we typically react. The much larger piece of the iceberg below the water, that tends to represent our character. And from there, we tend to respond. So what we are doing with our work is really doing our best to help people understand that they're typically going to get a better outcome when they take a moment to think things through and respond rather than react.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important, isn't it? I think particularly in a workplace, well, or in a relationship, I guess, to understand that we're all different. And instead of expecting people to behave in the way that you want them to all the time, understand that maybe the way they behave is just different to the way you behave and not necessarily wrong.
No, absolutely. And if you think about it in terms of, the golden rule in life being treat people as you would like to be treated, that's if the person happens to be somewhat like you in terms of their personality. But really the platinum rule is treat people as they need to be treated. And that's really a lot of what our book is about. It's very much around understanding the different personalities, how that plays into everything they do on a daily basis. And then on top of that, a few years ago, which is kind of the key to the kingdom, we developed what we call pause and play around what we call personal intervention. So I have a wristband. I am predominantly what we would call yellow-red, so tend to be quite fast-paced and somewhat optimistic in life. So I have a pause and play button on, and as do all the other color combinations. And for me, as somebody who's somewhat action-oriented and typically doesn't need a lot of information, it may need to press pause once in a while and make sure that others are able to keep up with what I'm talking about. People who are more predominantly green, blue, blue, green tend to be more steady paced, for example. They probably need a lot more information and time to process that information. So if you think about any walk of life, and in fact, we start in schools, Hannah. We start at somewhere between 7 and 8 years old. And if you think about children in a classroom, how they receive information is very much going to be mirrored by their personality. So if the teacher happens to be somebody who provides a lot of detail, you'll have some kids in the class who are sitting there and get quite fidgety or start doodling or could even be perceived as being disruptive, when all that's really happening is they've got the information they need and ready to move on.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And I think obviously the big point of this book is the more people who understand these points, the better their relationships in life will be.
Very, very much so. And so one of the things that we did when we wrote the book is we asked people who've, been on the journey with us over the last 20 odd years to basically give their anecdotes of, how the Eva colors have impacted them and their lives. And it's quite fascinating. We have everything from children who started with us who were 7 and 8 and now at university, all the way through to professionals who've been using the process for the last 20 years all over the world. And what's been interesting is regardless of where they're brought up, regardless of their culture, religion, geographical state, people who are top color red tend to answer questions the same way. They tend to want short, curt, minimal information. People who are top color green want more information. And as I say, want to know the how. They'll continually get a lot of questions from them. People who are top color blue don't like conflict, don't like to get in the middle of any kind of an argument. They very much don't like any form of what they would consider to be an uncomfortable situation just because it's getting a little bit kind of maybe a bit brisk, you might say, the conversation. Whereas people who are top color red would find the same conversation very stimulating and something that they'd like to keep going.
Yes, interesting. I can think about personal experiences with a lot of what you're saying. It's true, being around people with different personality types. Absolutely. So where do you suggest, other than buying your book and reading your book and understanding their own personality types, any kind of tips for people to get started on this?
Yeah, well, first of all, they can go to our website. It's equilibria.com. And in the top right-hand corner, there's a tab which says Discover Your E-Colors. And there's one, what we call a personality diversity indicator, which is just a way of discovering your E-Colors. We have one for 12 years and under. So if you have a child between the ages of 7 and 12, you may need to help them a little bit, but very interesting to discover their E-Colors. And then there's an adult's version for over 12. So there's a minimal information which you can get for free, or you can get a basic report which costs you about $4 or something, and then we actually have a premium report which is a 33-page report which takes the people a lot deeper. And typically what we're finding now is a lot of people around the world have chosen to become practitioners, so they will actually get onto our coaching program, become a practitioner, and take it into their own practice. So if they're a coach or a therapist or a teacher or somebody in industry, anybody who realizes that, if they like to help people understand themselves and others better, then this is something definitely for them.
Yeah. So I mentioned that this is kind of science backed, this guide. Where does the science side come into it?
It's a great question, actually, because if you think about the definition of science, is all about observation, experimentation. What we've been doing for the last 20 years is asking people. We have about 300 to 500 people a day come and discover what their E-Colors are. And so a lot of what we do is we're able to ask questions, which is like a basic charge, if you like, for when we're looking for information. And everything that we produce, which is seen a lot in this book and a lot of our other collateral, is all based on what people told us relative to their personality. So there's no guesswork involved. We've literally asked people to tell us. For example, we started with how could I get hurt? So hundreds of thousands of people told us how they could get hurt relative to their personality. Then we looked at what makes it difficult to have a difficult or necessary conversation. Then we looked at why people do and don't follow procedures. Then we looked at how people disrupt teamwork without even realizing they're doing it, what it takes to build trust, and many, many, many other questions. So we are continually looking and seeking out more information, which just further defines the different personality styles and how people interact with the world.
And have you found that through your research that people with the different personality types or the different E-Colors suit different roles in business? So, for example, CEOs and business leaders, do they tend to be a particular personality type?
It's interesting because, as I mentioned before, what we don't do is ever want people to be going for a job interview, for example, and somebody said, "What's your E-Colors?" "Oh, you're not suited for that job." That's definitely not the case.
No.
However, it does turn out that there are people who are, the way that I put it is, if people are happy in the role that they're doing, just like you, Hannah. I mean, I listened to you for several years now. I assume you love what you do, and I would assume that satisfies your personality. Yeah. And even if you think about the different presenters on TRE, the way they deliver the information is probably somewhat personality based. But I do think it's interesting, depending on the industry, for example, there are certain E-color combinations which tend to be more prevalent. For example, if we go into healthcare, you'll find a lot of the people who are very much on the kind of caring side, people who are working in situations where they're working with people who are coming to the end of their lives. They are generally people with a lot of empathy, and have to be, to go into a role like that. So again, it's not a question of picking the person for a role, but as I said, if people are happy doing what they're doing, they're probably satisfying their personality.
Yeah. And what about in relationships or friendships? Are there particular colours that work better together than others?
Well, it's interesting. We always have this conversation. My e-colours are predominantly yellow-red. My wife is Spanish. We just had our 46th wedding anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. I am predominantly yellow-red. She is predominantly blue-green. So she likes a lot of information, doesn't make decisions as quickly, which I may well do. So where I'm interested in, who's going to be involved and what should we do, she's more about why are we doing it and how are we going to do it. But somehow that seems to work very well when we're both together.
Yeah, well, they say opposites attract. So there we go.
There is definitely something in that. And then I have a daughter who's predominantly red-yellow, so very fast-paced, very action-oriented. And then I have a son who's predominantly blue-yellow, who has a lot more processes involved, thinking things through before he makes a decision. Is very well thought out. So, Again, takes all types to make the world go around, as you well know.
Oh, definitely. I suppose in a relationship, or even in a close working relationship, if you have got people that bring different things to the table, that can work well. If you've got two people that are the same, if, two people that don't make decisions easily, for example, can be a bit of a nightmare because they never get things done. They can't decide what restaurant to go to. They can't decide where to go on holiday. You often need one that's a little bit more laid back and easygoing, and the other one that naturally takes control and makes decisions a little bit more. That makes sense that those two personalities would work together.
Very, very much so. I give you a couple of good examples with that. We have a partnership in the US where we actually work with a guy who trains horses and teaches leadership using horses. And many years ago, sitting with him and actually kind of unlocking the potential, we realized that his horses have different personalities. So he actually had the horses wear the e-colours, which is absolutely fascinating. So over the years, this has really become very, very interesting because horses are completely, they have no political correctness. If you give it the right kind of information, it will basically do what you want it to do. And so over the years, we started having these sessions on a Sunday called Seeing is Believing, where we would take anybody who we knew, families, friends, who wanted to come and see it for themselves. They could spend a day, go through a series of exercises and watch it all play out. And Hannah, what I found quite interesting was several times people who were divorced, but both, had an interest, obviously, in their children would come together. And one of the people came up to me one day and they said, Lewis, I know that your PDI stands for Personality Diversity Indicator, but actually we could call it a pre-divorce indicator because if I'd known what I've learned today before, I probably wouldn't be getting divorced.
Oh, interesting. Gosh, yeah. Powerful stuff. And what about, have you seen any of this change in regards to all the digital communication that we do now? I know one of the things you talk about in the book is that we're communicating more digitally, but actually connecting less deeply.
Yes. Well, I'm sure you see this in every walk of life, and there's a lot of worry right now, especially for parents with, children who have, already got themselves some kind of digital device by the time they were 8-9 years old. The less they are communicating on a personal level and doing everything, through their phone, basically, is becoming quite worrying. And so what we're seeing a lot of is, and COVID didn't help either. If you think about kids who spent a lot of time at home during that whole period, their communication skills are not the greatest. And so what we're seeing is when we go into schools where we're able to bring the e-colours in, it has a remarkable effect on the children for many, many different aspects, actually, to a point of where bullying goes away, because now there's a much better understanding of why people are interacting the way that they're interacting. And a lot of different elements where, I'll just give you an example. When we first started taking the e-colours into schools in the States, the average graduation rate was 78.2%. And after we introduced the e-colors, the graduation rate would go up to between 99 and 100%.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So, and literally you'd have children going to the teachers and saying, can we arrange the classroom relative to our e-colors so we can all learn the way we need to learn? Quite fascinating to see.
Gosh, I bet it must be wonderful seeing all the effects in such a positive way that something that you've come up with is really taking shape around the world.
It is. It is an absolute privilege, and every day we see more and more of it, and it's. I think it's probably needed more now than ever. In fact, I was out walking. I live in Llanuthia behind Benidorm. I was out walking yesterday, bumped into some friends of mine I haven't seen for 20 odd years who are actually Norwegian. And they were saying, Lewis, why do you look so happy? I said, because I'm doing something I absolutely love. I mean, all of us who are involved in this, the people that wrote the book along with myself, and everything we do in Equilibria, when you see the impact it has on people, Hannah, it is quite remarkable to see. And there are so many practical applications as well. Just watching people, I'll give you an example. Last week I was in Portugal running a session for an organization where the half the people are from Austin in Texas and the other half are from Holland. And to see them come together and the e-colors become the common language within a day, quite fascinating to watch. And that's the impact of what this can have when people realize that the only thing that they need is to understand how to better communicate with the other person. It makes a huge difference. I mean, look at all the trouble that's going on in the world today and just think if only the people were able to listen, through a common language, we'd be a lot better off.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The issue is, I think, with a lot of relationships, both in the workplace and personally, is people want to change people all the time. They think, if my husband behaved more in this way, we'd be happier, or he wouldn't annoy me so much. Or if my boss didn't speak to me in such a way, then I'd like him more, or whatever. We're wanting people to behave in the way that we want them to, but understanding that they're just different and they behave a certain way because of their personality. Well, yeah, it allows you to be a lot more accepting and understanding of people, doesn't it?
Hannah, very well said. So I actually, in our presentations, we use a kind of pathway going up the mountain. And at the bottom of the mountain, it starts with doubt and resistance because, okay, when we go into a school, 8-year-olds typically don't have any doubt or resistance because it's all just learning to them, right? But you get with people who are a little lot further on in their lives and they go, well, I've never understood any of this before. Why do I need that in my life? But after a while, particularly once they get their premium report, which we found really useful, and people start to realize that, wow, this is me. There's no getting away from it. This is written to me because it's been well written to understand the different personalities. People go more into this understanding of themselves and others. And then as they move up the mountain, the way that we look at it, the next level is what we call tolerance. So people will start to tolerate each other. They may not celebrate it, but they do accept the fact that, well, we're not all the same, but I guess I can live with it. And then move to acceptance. And once you get up to acceptance, exactly what you're saying, we start to realize that people are different. We accept the fact that they're different and then really move into what we call appreciation. And then you really start to appreciate that people are different and what one person brings, what one strength or set of strengths that one person brings can very much complement another. And that top level we talk about is what we call the celebration of diversity of thought. So when you've got people coming at a different situation with completely different perspectives, just like you say, you go back to something as simple as where should we go and eat tonight? And one person's more determined than the other to call, or quite happy to make the decision. And that's accepting both sides. Then life becomes a lot easier.
Definitely. Well, if people want to get a copy of Personalities Remixed, it's available on our website, tre.radio. We've been speaking to one of the authors, Lewis Senior. Lewis, thanks so much for joining us. Lovely to chat with you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.